Hi, everybody. Happy Saturday to you all. I thought what I would do is just put up online a short overview of the exam coming up on Wednesday. I've had a couple of requests from people who are starting to do some early reading and some early preparation for the exam. In class on Monday, I will go over in a bit more detail the review that I've posted up, and I put that under content on exam number 1 review. But what I want to do here is just talk a little bit about the exam itself, and more specifically the types of questions that I ask, or at least the approach that I take in the exam. Obviously every faculty sets their own style of exam, and my goal in my exams is to really focus on and determine if and to what degree you've reached the objectives of the course. And what I mean by that is, it's pretty straightforward to set an exam with lots of multiple choice questions that just require regurgitation. And yeah, certain facts and things are important, but I set my exams, I hope at least, with more of a focus on application and the comprehension of the material, right? So I want you to be able to think rather than rely on just simple rote memory and recall. So as I just mentioned, yeah, certain facts are important. Certain people, dates, numbers are important, but so is context on a particular topic. So the way in which I structure my exam, and Wednesdays will be no different, is we'll have a number, 30, 40, something like that, multiple choice. I try and set the multiple choice that are clear and unambiguous. So for example, you'll never see a multiple choice that has A, B, C, D, E as options, and then in the list of choices it'll be A, B, C, but not D and E, or A, C, D. And that just is confusing. So you'll get 4 or 5 choices in a multiple choice. There's always a clear, correct answer. And when I set a question on where I require a particular fact of recall, let's just use an example. Population of the world. We've talked about 7.8 billion being the approximate number of people on the planet. I would never set a multiple choice that would say, okay, the population of the world is, and then give you a range of choices from 7.6 to 7.9. They give you a clear distinction in the choices as it relates to the material that we've covered in class. So there are 4 types of multiple choice questions in my exams. I set knowledge type questions. This is the recall of information, a particular date, an event, a direction, a movement, or something along those lines. There's a comprehension or a set of comprehension questions which focus on the interpretation of information. Application, which is basically using information to solve a particular problem. And then also analytical type questions, breaking down material into constituent parts and then looking at their interrelationships. And what I'd like to do here is just give you an example of each, right? This will give you a sense as to the type of questions I ask. So here's a knowledge-based question, right? The question would be about what % of the world's population live in acute poverty. Now, we didn't actually specifically cover that. I talked about poverty and living on less than $1.90 a day, but I never went through what percentage of the world's population. So don't panic if you don't know the answer to this, because we didn't cover it. But here's the example, right? About what % of the world lives in acute poverty, right? 0.2, 2, 20, 35, or 50. And there's an example of a knowledge-based question that has, I think, a pretty decent spread. And even if you didn't know this particular answer, I'd also try and set multiple choice questions that, if you were just to think about it a little bit, may at least give you a reasonable guess. So we've talked about, for example, 1/5 of the world's population, don't have access to, electricity or adequate nutrition. So you could probably guess that that would be about 20%. So that's a knowledge-based question. Here's a comprehension type question. So the question is, utilitarian conservationists tend to believe that resources should be saved because they are important, A, as a home for wildlife, B, in the conservation of aesthetic values, C, to our understanding of the biosphere, D, for a strong economic system, and E, used by all living things. So the comprehension here focuses, of course, on the term utilitarian, right? So we talked about this, utilitarian or pragmatic resource conservation, the ethic espoused by Theodore Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, and Gibbon Pinchot, and the idea that you should manage and use your resources wisely for the greater good and for the people here and now, and for things like building houses. So the only answer there could be, the only answer is D, for a strong economic system, right? Aesthetic values is John Muir. The others are not relevant to that particular topic, right? So that's a comprehension type question. Okay, so here's another one. This is an analysis type question. So here's a graph, and it shows population going down over time. And the question is, the doubling time for the following curve is doing what? Constant, unpredictable, continually increasing, continually decreasing, and now the above. So the analysis part is you've got to understand what doubling time is and then how to apply that to a particular question or problem. Now, a lot of people here would look at the graph and see the curves going down and then answer D, that it's continually decreasing, but it's not. The answer here is C. The doubling time is continually increasing. Now, how's that the case? Well, if your population is declining over time, right, it means your growth rate is declining over time. And if your growth rate is going down over time, it means it's taking longer and longer for that population to double, because remember that the doubling time is 70 divided by the growth rate. So there's an analysis type question, and then application, right? And it's this one's a straightforward one because it's similar to the previous one, but you're applying the concept of doubling time to solve a problem. If the world growth rate was 10%, the population would double every how many years? 2, 7, 25, 55, or 125. Straightforward. Rule of 70. Take 70 divided by 10. The answer there is 7. So I mix up the multiple choice, and you'll get, as I say, somewhere between 30 and 40 of those multiple choice questions. And then importantly, I ask a section that has a number of short answer written response type questions, right? I'll phrase a question, and sometimes it's just worth a couple of points, sometimes it's worth 5. Take a look when I ask that question, how many points are ascribed to that particular question. So for example, if there are 5 points, don't just put one word, right? I'm looking for something a little deeper. I'm looking for an explanation of a particular concept, for example. So there'll be, probably about 25% or so of the first exam will be written responses. I know that takes time to grade, but I think that's important. I'll talk in class on Monday morning a little bit more about this. I'll go through the study guide as well, just to give you a bit more direction. But I hope that at least gives you a sense as to what's coming up. As I put in the email to everybody today, we're running slightly behind. So the study guide I've given you may or may not need to include renewable energy. We'll just see how we go on Monday. My goal on Monday is to just finish off context that we need to in the previous lecture. That's about 10 to 15 minutes. I'll talk a little bit about the exam. I'll add another 10 or 15 minutes to that. And then I want to do fossil fuels, and then at least get through fossil fuels, which will then open up the scope to do nuclear energy and at least part of the renewable space on Tuesday. So that's the plan. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Have a great Sunday.